Shadow Minister Alicia Kearns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This debate is very timely and I congratulate the honourable gentleman on securing it, because in recent months the Joint Committee on National Security Strategy has been joined by an ever-growing and increasingly anxious chorus of voices, despairing at the government's failings on national security. Lord Robertson, who this government commissioned and asked to lead the Strategic Defence Review, warned in April that Britain's security was in peril due to the, and I quote, corrosive complacency that was being shown to defence. He went so far as to accuse the Treasury of vandalism. Then earlier this month, the Right Honourable Member for Royal Marsh and Conisbrough resigned as Defence Secretary. He was clear the reason was a defence investment plan, which the Times newspaper, it appears, has also had sight of. He's claimed that it did not give the armed forces the resources they need. He is followed out the door by the Armed Forces Minister, who said the government's plans were neither transformative enough nor sufficiently funded. Now, given the honourable member had served our armed forces, you have thought his warning might have been heeded.
My honourable friend allow?
I will happily give way.
Bearing in mind an item that's appeared in the news reports today, does she agree with me that either of those two right honourable in one case, honourable and gallant gentlemen in the other case, would be a far more suitable future Secretary-General of NATO than the present Prime Minister, whose lack of proper funding of a defence policy, amongst other deficiencies, has led him to be looking for a new job?
I thank my honourable friend. I have to say that I always found the former Defence Secretary to be very decent in the way he engaged cross-party and worked cross-party and how seriously he took the job. I don't think there is a vacancy for the NATO Secretary for a very long time, at least another 8 years. But no, I do not think the current Prime Minister, who's taken us from 3rd place to 12th in NATO defence spending in the last couple of years, would be the right man to lead NATO at this time or any other. The shadow hanging over this whole state of affairs is the Defence Investment Plan. It was due for publication in autumn 2025, and of course we have not yet seen it. As a NATO member, we are committed to spending 5% of GDP on defence and national security by 2035, 3.5% on core defence and 1.5% on national security and resilience. So let's review where the government actually is. On rearmament, on the progress towards 3.5 and 1.5%, as I say, we are 31st out of 32 NATO members, second to last, and we have only moved to that place in the last year. We are bested only by Iceland, a country that has no armed forces at all, and that is where the government has currently left us on the road to rearmament. On defence spending as a percentage of GDP, we've gone from 3rd in 2021 to 12th this year. Both of these are on the Labour government. The failure of this government to properly fund our core defence is not just a disaster, but actually it's an international humiliation. And the very same pattern is playing out across national security and resilience. Lord Harris, Chair of the National Preparedness Commission, has said that funds for these vital areas are currently being treated as a creative accountancy exercise. And when you look at the figures before us today, you see what he means. Now, there is a headline increase for the Cabinet Office's security-focused expenditure, I recognise that. But the vast bulk of that additional £130 million is simply the Integrated Security Fund being moved from the Foreign Office to the Cabinet Office. It's not new money, it's the same money in a different pocket. Meanwhile, and this is the figure that tells the real story, the budget for the National Security Secretariat has been cut to £18.9 million, down from £34.4 million last year. That's nearly halved at a moment like this. Whilst there is very little detail that's been given to us to scrutinise, what is clear is that Cabinet Office spending on national security and resilience is not the level that is required, nor will it match the threats that we face. So I'll press the Minister on specific areas shortly, but let's check in on some past commitments. Have they been fulfilled? Or, like the Defence Investment Plan, are they languishing out of sight, underfunded and promised but never delivered? In February, the former Security Minister promised a 1/3 increase to the Integrated Security Fund for Indo-Pacific threats, primarily the Chinese Communist Party. There is no sign of it. We were promised a £17 million increase in counter-terrorism funding and a further £10 million to address organised crime by the end of 2026-27. Is the government on track to deliver these, or have they too been quietly forgotten? Now let me turn to specific areas that demand this House's attention. First, cybersecurity. As we've heard from various honourable members, over the last year 40% of British businesses have suffered a cyber attack or breach. Iconic names like Marks & Spencer's and Jaguar Land Rover. The Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill the government brought forward was welcome, but it was not sufficient. Indeed, it fails to name the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. And extraordinarily, it excluded central and local government computer systems from its scope. The very systems that hold our citizens' data have been left outside the bill. What investment is being made to bolster our cyber defences, and is that funding rising? Second, subsea cables. The JCNSS reported last September on the risk of our undersea cables being targeted by hostile states. They carry 99% of our data, the arteries of our economy and of our daily life. Closer cooperation with GEF nations, especially Norway, has been welcomed across this House. But specific plans and any funding remains elusive. But these cables carry everything that we do, and there is no plan to protect them. So I ask the Minister, when will funding come forward to do so? Third, biological security. We've discussed the COVID pandemic today and the inquiry that followed. It laid bare the need for a greater focus on biosecurity. The government promised that it would publish the Cabinet Office's plan for biological emergencies this spring. That deadline has, like many others, been missed. So can the Minister tell us when those plans will finally appear, and when will the £1 billion promised to establish a network on national biosecurity centres come to be? Fourth, our critical national infrastructure. Putin's renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine and the brutality that Russia has industrialised should serve as a warning. The Russian military has deliberately targeted power infrastructure, substations, pylons, cables. Drone warfare has made our energy networks a target from terrorists and hostile states. As a member for Rutland Stamford, I am dismayed at the government's plans to put a string of mile upon mile of pylons across eastern England, because one single drone could plunge huge swathes of our country into darkness. And Google Maps literally provides an online map, a targeting plan for anyone who wishes us harm. We have the capability to lay those cables underground. Instead, the government has chosen to sacrifice our security to save a few pounds, when we should be learning from Putin's daily attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure. Fifth, and this matters more than any other line and has been discussed, I believe, by every single member, is the whole of society resilience. The threats we discuss cannot be tackled by government alone. It would be foolish to suggest so. They demand that each and every one of us are prepared and able to play our part. But the government, therefore, has to kick off the national conversation it promised. And so here I think we must be honest about a failure that is not Labour's alone, and I quite agree with the chair of the JCNSS. But since the Iraq War, it has suited the political class to say to the public, you don't need to worry about national security, you don't need to worry about foreign policy, don't you worry your little heads, we've got it under control. And we've taught a generation or two that danger is someone else's problem, that resilience is a job for the state, and that citizens don't need to think about it at all. And we've allowed the public to abdicate their personal responsibility, whether it's choices about whether or not to be on TikTok, get off it, or the purchases you make or the way you live your life. And that is a fatal arrow in the heart of our national resilience. Because when the crisis comes, and it will come, a people who've never been asked to prepare will not suddenly know how to. The Lord's Risk Assessment Committee, the JCNSS and the National Preparedness Commission have all called for a single, simple step: the appointment of a Chief Resilience Officer to coordinate across government. This is a sensible suggestion, and I'm not sure why it's been ignored. This role would look at protecting everything from our research, innovation, to our education, to our universities, to genomics, abuse of charities, the information environment, and tackle things like the use of organised crime that led to that heinous attack on our Prime Minister that has been exploited by foreign states who have misconstrued what took place in order to harm the government. That is a shameful state of affairs, and one that I agree we should have discussed more. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I turn now to China. Before the election, Labour promised to take China to the International Court over the genocide of the Uyghurs, an issue both you and I have spoken about consistently in this place. They promised a full audit of China policy to guide strategy across every department, and yet the China audit was never published. Its contents have never been shared with this House, and we're now in a situation where the National Security Advisor travels regularly to Beijing to meet Chinese Communist Party officials, meetings we only find out about because the Chinese Communist Party publishes press releases. They are more transparent than our own government, and not least because he will not appear before this Parliament, unlike all of his predecessors, to face justice, justice, scrutiny, both, because doesn't our country deserve to know that things are being done right? How can we know that it's being done right, that our country is being protected and that hostile states are being held to account if there is no scrutiny? Our own government keeps quiet while preparing to pay billions to surrender sovereignty over the Chagos Islands, and we do not see the very protections put in place used. We passed the National Security Act precisely to counter the threat from hostile states, yet Labour refuses to put China in the enhanced tier, and the results speak for itself. It is now 1 year, Madam Deputy Speaker, in July, since the Foreign Interference Registration Scheme came into force. How many organisations or companies do you believe have registered as working for China on the Foreign Influence Risk Register? Not one. 3 have registered as working for Republika Srpska, a tiny little entity within Bosnia, but not one says they are getting any money from the Chinese state. Have there been any investigations about this failure of anyone to register themselves? No. Have there been any prosecutions? No. Why? Because the government is too busy wooing the Chinese Communist Party to deter it. And when the Prime Minister went to Beijing, he even met with Kai Chi, the very man who'd been running a spy network targeting this parliament. He did not apologise for doing so. He seemed to think it was the right thing to do. And since that case collapsed last year, there have been 0 repercussions to the Chinese Communist Party for spying on this parliament. That is not deterrence. It is rewarding a state that has attacked our parliament. Why is this government content to let our own laws be flouted by Beijing? Because let's be honest here about what's been described. A retailer that sells our groceries has been halted by hostile actors. A car maker that employs thousands of our constituents has been brought to its knees. Undersea cables carrying 99% of our data shadowed and mapped by the Russian vessels. A spy network run from Beijing against its own parliament. Our own Prime Minister attacked. Luckily, him and his family were not hurt. And the government answers all this with a transferring of budgets and missed deadlines and an audit it won't publish. These are not isolated incidents. We are not at peace, yet we may not be in the same state of war that our grandparents would have recognised. There is no declaration, no front line, no army amassing on our borders, thankfully. But make no mistake, we are under sustained, deliberate and coordinated attack every single day. Call it what you will, but previous generations understood their duties when the nation's under threat, and they put our country on a war footing. They found the money, told the public truth, and did not hide behind creative accountancy. Not my words, those of an expert. 31st of 32. A National Security Secretariat that's been cut in half, no resilience officer, no investment plan, and no published order. That is not the posture of a country that knows it's under attack. So my challenge to the Minister is simple. Fund what must be funded and protect what must be protected. And I conclude this debate, as it is again about the money, about asking about what the figures cannot show. Once you strip out the transfers of function and the accounting changes, what is the real term trajectory of spending on the security and resilience functions of the Cabinet Office? If it is rising, by how much and how fast? Because the first duty of the state is to protect its people, and on the evidence before us today, based purely on the figures alone, is a duty the government is failing. History will not forgive those who saw the danger, named it, and look away. And so we hope the government will take away our requests and act to fund our defence, fund our national security, and step up and fund our national resilience.
Well,